Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on digital nomads. My name is Fatima Mante, and together with my colleague Irene Rodrigues, we organize the cycle of webinars on contemporary mobilities. This is the first, and it is dedicated to digital nomads. This is an event of the research stream PopMob, that is Population and Mobility, within CAP, the Research Center for Administration and Public Policy, one of the research centers here at our school, which is the School for Social and Political Sciences within the University of Lisbon. I would like to extend a special welcome to our guest, Olga Hannonen, to whom we thank for having accepted our invitation to participate as a speaker and share with us the results of her research on this very important and timely topic. We are honored that you made it possible to accommodate this event on your busy schedule. Olga Hannonen holds a PhD in human geography. She is a lecturer and a researcher at the Business School, University of Eastern Finland. She specializes in human nature interactions and lifestyle mobilities, including second home and residential mobilities and digital nomadism. She is the author of several articles and book chapters on the topic that she will address here today. Before giving the floor to Olga, I wish to thank the support that was provided by the staff in CAP, namely Daniela Martins, who assisted us in preparing the webinar. After Olga's presentation, we will have a period for questions, so you can save them for that moment, or you can just write them down here in our chat that me and Irene will look them up and will prepare them to be presented to our speaker. Finally, just to let you know, those who have entered more recently, that our speaker Olga is recording this session, and in that moment I will pass the word to her. Olga, you have the floor from now on. Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this webinar series, and I'm honored to open this webinar series today. Let me start sharing the screen, and thank you for the introduction. I think some of the, can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can.
But it's not in a presentation mode now.
Yeah.
Today I will be talking about mobilities and digital nomadism. And as you heard, I'm Olga Hannonen, a lecturer and a researcher at Business School, University of Eastern Finland. So I'm happy to see some of fellow colleagues who do research on digital nomadism and lifestyle mobilities here today. And I will be referencing to some of you today in my presentation. So I would like to thank you for inspiring me in my work, in my research, and helping me to frame my ideas. So, and this piece, actually, I'm also grateful to Lin Wei Tiang from the University of Singapore, who nudged me to put my ideas into writing. And hopefully this presentation, the paper that the presentation is based on, will be out soon, and I will be sharing that information through my social media networks and through other channels. So please stay tuned. Things that I will be talking today, I've been developing and presenting bits and pieces in some other seminars and conferences. So for those of you who been with me on other conferences, some of the things might sound similar or familiar to you. But anyway, here I present a more complete ideas on application of mobility lens to digital nomadism. And before I start, I would like to emphasize that this presentation is not providing an exhaustive and complete perspective, but I just want to open the discussion and invite other researchers to further develop the application of mobility lens when we talk about digital nomadic mobilities. So quickly, the content of my presentation today. I will first talk about digital nomads and mobile lifestyles, developments in mobilities. I will not introduce digital nomads and give thorough definitions and characteristics. I have another webinar on that you can find on YouTube. I will give some information in the end of the presentation, so you can learn about that in more detail through another presentation. Then I will be talking about mobility regimes. And I think when we talk about digital nomadic mobilities, it's impossible not to talk about mobility regimes. I also touch upon the concepts of motility and immobility and how they are present in digital nomadism. Then I will look at digital nomads and contemporary approaches to mobilities of work, and finish with tourism, lifestyle migration, and lifestyle mobility perspectives and how they can help us to understand and look at digital nomadic mobilities. So let's start with the definition. And digital nomads are defined as highly mobile professionals whose work is location independent. Thus, they work while traveling on a semi-permanent basis and vice versa. Digital nomads serve as an example of the mobilities development that has been brought by the mobilities turn. John Arry, a theorist of a new mobilities paradigm, argues that the notion of mobility is not new. The new is, among other things, the scale and diversity of movement, interconnections of physical movement and communication, importance of multiple mobilities for people's social and emotional lives, and expansion of mobilities across national societies. So digital nomads are a vivid example of the new in mobilities. They encompass the connectivity and proximity at a distance that Ari outlines as peculiar feature of contemporary mobilities. Digital nomadic mobilities demonstrates also the time-space compression that brought people closer together and formed new connections between places due to both technological development, the pace of mobility, and internationalization of movement. Digital nomadism is a novel mobility type that is the result of incorporation of mobile technologies in everyday life, greater travel possibilities, the ease of movement, advancement in transportation systems, growing connections, the changing nature of work, leading to location independence, as well as the financial pressure, higher cost of living, and precariousness of employment in home countries that have forced some individuals seek cheaper destinations and other more affordable lifestyles. So when we look at this growing lifestyle, we see that digital nomadism undermines traditional sedentary perspectives and attachments to home, work, and even nation state, and expand in empirical and theoretical facets of mobilities. So digital nomads are viewed as the intersection of travel, leisure, and work, and they have been categorized, among others, as mobile and flexible workers, as an extreme form of remote worker, global travelers, and digital nomad tourists, among others. So here you can see on the graph, which is from my paper published in 2020, that digital nomads incorporate the elements of work-related travel and lifestyle-led travel. They develop work and lifestyle identities by having work elements and lifestyle elements. in their lifestyle, and they also have social, touristic, and digital identities. And more about these different identities of digital nomads, you can read in my recent co-authored paper that has just been published in Tourism Management. Here you can see the reference to that. So yeah, when we look at work-related and lifestyle-related mobility in digital nomadism, so we have to mention two main differentiating factors. So digital nomads are not comply fully with work-related mobilities that are listed here due to extensive travel, and they not fully comply with lifestyle mobilities because of the importance of work productivity that they have. Also, what I want to mention here is that the pandemic outbreak has facilitated the speed of growth of digital nomadism, and it developed other remote work and travel lifestyles, such as domestic digital nomadism, or in Finland, it's called remote work travel and vacations. And this pandemic-driven remote work and travel are not implemented on the ongoing basis and can be categorized as subcategories of digital nomadism. Though these developed forms of remote work travel, they speak for a dynamic and evolving nature of contemporary mobilities under changing socio-political, economic, and global health circumstances. So also in recent years, we see that broader demographic group, such as families with children, have entered digital nomad market, as well as corporate workers and so-called traditional office employees who started working remotely. There are no exact numbers on digital nomads, but many know and many use and refer to the State of Independence in America survey that give us at least some numbers in the US context. So the latest survey shows that in the US alone, 16.9 million American workers describe themselves as digital nomads, which is 131% increase from the pre-pandemic year of 2019. So we see the growing scale of this phenomenon. So talking about digital nomadic lifestyle, it's often regarded as a manifestation of freedom, of choice and movement. So location independence due to remote work is one of the central features of digital nomadism. However, mobile work is conditioned by employment regulations or corporate mobilities regimes that encompass a set of principles and norms that govern the mobility of employees. So here you can also see the definition of mobility regime and different forms of mobility regime that exist. So, and in relation to digital nomadism, the mobility regimes, right, that stretch from international mobility control to domestic mobility and corporate movement of employees. So these mobility regimes, they shape the mobility strategies of digital nomads and their negotiation of mobility structures as both as citizens of a particular state and employees of a certain organizations. So they have to negotiate multiple mobility regimes, both as employees and as citizens of particular state. Specifically, digital nomads' freedom of mobility is often conditioned by the employment terms in relation to remote work and by entry and exit mobility regimes, the validity of visas and passports that define under which conditions and for how long one can stay in a destination, as well as exit a home country. So mobility regimes of digital nomad destinations that define specific entry regulations and limitations on the length of stay have produced a leeway in the form of visa runs. So a visa run presumes a renewal of the visitor status by leaving and re-entering the destination country. Paul Green, in his study on later life Westerners in Southeast Asia, gives differentiating perspectives on visa runs. On the one hand, it's a form of state-enforced mobility that causes an unwelcome disruption to daily routines and involves extra financial input. On the other hand, it's a possibility for a touristic exploration of a region through the need of leaving the destination country and restamping the entry. Fabiola Mancinelli argues, hello Fabiola, that border controls and visa regimes affect the digital nomads' potential to move and put them in a vulnerable position in regards to immigration laws, owing to their ambiguous status as they work from the place, but not within it. And this is an omnipresent contradiction in digital nomadism, as working professionals, they are moving and staying on the tourist visas and visa-free entry conditions while they are working. Woldoff and Litchfield suggest that the engagement in visa run actually indicates a more serious commitment to the digital nomad lifestyle and community. However, they also emphasize that few digital nomads can actually sustain the frequent passport stamping lifestyle for long periods of time. So this is the situation in which we would think that a digital nomad visa would solve the problem. And we see rapidly growing digital nomad visa schemes in different parts of the world, from Costa Rica to Croatia, from Argentina to Malaysia. So, digital nomad visa schemes in various places are presented as increasing opportunities for nomads to extend their stays without engaging into visa runs. And digital nomad visa is often marketed by these states as a tool that welcomes digital nomadic mobilities. However, having a more precise look, digital nomad visa is yet another type of mobility regulation and control that defines who is qualified to become a digital nomad in a specific destination. So the visa requirements usually include an income threshold, employment relationship, insurance, and in many cases, an expensive visa fee. Thus, digital nomad visa sorts out a specific category of digital nomads that is welcome for an extended stay, and in such a manner, it's also a form of mobility or visa regime. So it's important to note that the first digital nomad visas have been launched during the COVID-19 pandemic, mainly as a solution for the receiving destinations that were suffering from the travelers' decline, rather than a way to legalize those nomads who stuck in a way in those destinations due to mobility restrictions during the pandemic. More about a digital nomad visa you can hear in my podcast. My guest, Jan Berners, is given a very good explanation and talks in detail about digital nomad visas. Again, I will provide more information in the end of this presentation, so you can check it out. So another point that I want to mention here is that the outbreak of COVID-19 has reinforced mobility regimes through the hardening of borders and even outright border closures, as well as through international travel-related interventions, such as traveler screening and testing for the symptoms of illness, through travel restrictions, quarantine requirements, and vaccination requirements. And these changed mobility conditions are also referred to as biophysical testing regimes to pass through borders. So the pandemic-driven travel restrictions and growing mobility regimes have shown how quickly and drastically international mobilities and the freedom of movement can be modified and impact, among others, digital nomads as well as other lifestyles, mobile lifestyles. So motility and immobility. Some authors, some researchers talk about digital nomads' potential and ability to move. However, when talking about that, researchers have not framed this potential and ability in mobility's terms. So the system of mobility potential is referred to as motility. So what I'm trying to say here that motility has not been used as a term to describe potential and ability to move, which is a mobilities research term. Vincent Kaufman describes motility at an individual level as a way in which an individual or an actor appropriates the field of possible action in the area of mobility and uses it to develop individual projects. In such a manner, motility is interrelated with common features of digital nomads lifestyle, such as flexibility and freedom of choice. As Matas and Ardevol, you can see the citation on the slide, noted that nomadic life brings the potentiality to move, but one can also feel at home in a place and stay longer, always maintaining the conditions to travel if one wants to. In this sense, the nomad does not necessarily move physically, but has and represents the potential to move if desired. So I think this quote actually a definition of motility in relation to digital nomads. An important aspect in digital nomadic mobilities is not only the potential to move, but also a possibility to stay put. Flavia Kangia and others suggest that the pandemic caused remote work and mobility restrictions have caused a transition from digital nomadism to rooted digitalism. Contrasting general assumptions that remote work facilitates relocations and contributes to proliferation of digital nomadism, they argue that in their study, in case of IT workers during COVID-19, remote work can be expressed as immobility too. Immobility can be seen as a path of slowing down, a way to control and choose spatial and temporal conditions of work. At the same time, when slowing down and staying put, digital nomads do not lose other types of mobilities, as Kangia and others suggest that in home environments and private space, they stimulate other types of mobilities, such as mental mobility through reflection and creativity, professional mobility through focus on work and telecommuting, and existential mobility through hobbies and spending time with family and friends. So in this regard, digital nomads can marry physical immobility with other mobilities and connections. So they rather shift the focus from location independence to a freedom of choice. So going further, this is about motility and immobility in digital nomadism. So the next thing I want to talk about is digital nomads and mobilities of work. So we know that mobility and work productivity are essential components of digital nomadism. And here I bring again the same graph that I developed in my publication in 2020 that shows that digital nomads embrace certain elements of mobile and flexible work types, but do not fully comply with them, such as telecommuting, freelancing, and traveling professionals. So also you can, on differentiation between these categories, you can read in my paper in more detail. But I want to focus on contemporary studies of works and mobilities. And So far, I found at least three perspectives, three contemporary perspectives on studies of work and mobilities. Again, this is not an exhaustive list, and you are welcome to expand this list and expand these perspectives. The three perspectives. The first one is employment-related geographical mobility. The second one, digitalization of movement, work and telecommuting. And the third one, increasing flexibility of work and co-location. So when we look at the first perspective, employment-related geographical mobility, that includes mobile work and commuting. So this perspective looks at mobility between the fixed location of home and workplace, in which geographical relocation is viewed as a necessity. And mobile work reconfigures residential arrangement and involves multiple moorings with circular movement and long distance commuting. So you can see the examples of mobile work and employment-related geographical mobility here on the slide. So from these examples, you can see that these types of mobility are very distant from digital nomadism in nature and in purpose of their mobilities. However, there's a common element, which is an extensive spatio-temporal patterns, as well as temporary emplacement that bridges mobile work and digital nomadism. However, again, in digital nomadism, we do not see the need to travel to a place of work where they are not compelled by a necessity to move to a particular location, to a different location, to accomplish work-related duties. So looking at this second perspective, we can say that technological advancement and digitalization are driving factors in changing the nature and format of work. Telecommuting has become a widespread example of such a shift. Telecommuting is a work arrangement away from a conventional workplace that is supported with computer-based technologies. So in such a manner, telecommuting can bring greater residential relocations, allowing living further away from a place of work, and as well as allowing to dwell in multiple places. So it should be noted that when we talk about telecommuting, we do not talk about home as a distinct location for telecommuting, because a person can telecommute from home, from a library, from co-working space, from a coffee shop, or even from the office, if he or she connects to some other colleagues or clients that are located somewhere else. So telecommuting is a part of digital nomads' daily job performance from various locations around the world. However, when we talk about telecommuting, we should remember that telecommuters do not normally change their place of residence, but digital nomads do. And telecommuting, however, can enable hypermobility, such as digital nomadism. Also, another differentiating factor between telecommuting and digital nomadism is that in telecommuters, they balance between family duties and work, while when we talk about digital nomads, they balance between leisure and work. Also, to some extent, telecommuting is related to geographical immobility that is substituted with high technological connectivity and interaction. So in such a manner, telecommuting is also a part of rooted digitalism that I have mentioned earlier today. So, and the third perspective, here we should say that studies around the changing nature of work that lead to greater individual mobility are focused on the aspects of increasing flexibility of work and workspaces. Flexible work includes such components as timing of implementation and the work environment. This means that flexible workers often choose some alternative environments, such as coffee houses or libraries. And the emergence of co-working environments has provided an alternative to traditional office environments. So co-working spaces have become spaces that cater for social needs of digital nomads, where they can connect to other lifestyle peers. And here we also go to this social identity of digital nomads that we describe in, again, me and my colleagues in a fresh paper in tourism management that you can see also reference on the slide. So just to repeat that co-working spaces cater for this social needs, social identity of digital nomads, as geographic flexibility can lead to indirect isolation due to the blurring boundaries between leisure and work. So co-working spaces have become communities of support among like-minded travelers. Also, when we talk about work-related or professional mobilities, I think an important point here is to indicate that professional mobilities include the movement up or down the career ladder. And in this regard, digital nomadism is not necessarily connected to professional growth, as issues of downshifting, underemployment are mentioned in relation to professional mobilities of digital nomads, as well as attempts to diversify income, such as drop shipping and other ways to earn a living. Again, going back to these three perspectives, contemporary perspectives on studies of work and mobilities, just to mention that when we look on co-working and telecommuting and studies on co-working and telecommuting do not look into wider mobility trajectories of individuals, including the international scale of travel and the deterritorialization of work. So basically non-location work and home that are performed in digital nomadism. So again, we can see that digital nomadism expands the facets of contemporary perspectives on work and mobilities. So the location-independent work of digital nomads is accompanied by purposeful engagement in travel, turning remote work into a lifestyle. And here we are coming to the last point in today's presentation, the last but not least. So the perspectives and how we can look at digital nomadism from tourism studies, from lifestyle migration and lifestyle mobility perspectives. So digital nomads have touristic motivations, among which novelty, the change of scene, and new experiences are the main ones. These are also the main motives in tourism in general. So this unites digital nomads with tourists. In addition, digital nomads have been treated as a new, distinct customer segment by the tourism service providers and destination service providers and DMOs and marketing organizations. So we can see that crafted packages have been actively created for digital nomads by destination service providers that include, among others, co-living, co-working spaces, leisure programs and services, healthcare, get-together events, conferences, and retreats. So these growing private and public sector services speak for growth and intensification of digital nomadic mobilities through attracting them to destinations as tourist and traveler segments. Also, again, referring to my recent paper, we also pointed out that digital nomads do have a touristic identity. So exactly because of their motivations and as they are also treated by the supply side as a specific traveler segment. So at the same time, digital nomadism can also be seen from the perspective of lifestyle migration. And Fabiola Mancinelli actually develops this perspective. When we talk about digital nomadism, it involves human relocation at the global scale, as well as implicates issues of geo-arbitrage, inequalities, and privileges. This perspective indeed would help to have a better look on the impact of these mobilities on destinations, and among the most recently discussed questions in relation to digital nomadism are the issues of uneven geographies, displacement of locals, and gentrification. It's also important to mention that the division between temporary traveler and a permanent migrant has been questioned by many scholars who study semi-permanent relocations and lifestyle mobilities, as many types of mobilities alternate or coincide, and some supposed migrants do not migrate but perform temporary or seasonal movements. Also empirically, there are no limits of individual transition between various mobility states and concepts between permanent, semi-permanent mobility or immobility. Fabiola Mancinelli, however, emphasizes that the privileged status of digital nomads unites them with other lifestyle migrants, for example, retirement migrants. So another point here in lifestyle migration perspective is aspiration of a good life. That is a bridging factor between lifestyle migration and digital nomadic mobilities. So spatial relocation with a goal of a better quality of life is a major feature of lifestyle migration that explains the reasoning and outcomes of such movements. So in a similar manner, for example, Matas and Ardevol, they have noted that mobility appears a core element of the pursuit of a good life in digital nomadic mobilities. While practical implementation of this good life and lifestyle migration and a digital nomadism result in different mobility practices, the semantic connotation of a good life appears to carry a common pursuit for achieving a more favorable work-life balance, greater control over working lives, including downshifting and alternative lifestyles. Despite some common features between lifestyle migration and digital nomadism, I argue that migration perspective towards digital nomadic mobilities as an act of physical relocation between places has a sedentary connotation and presumes stillness and stability within movement. So it conflicts with the desired location independence and dynamism of digital nomadic mobilities. Thus, I argue that migration studies approach is too narrow to outline the variety and complexity of movements and connections within digital nomadism. Instead, I suggest to apply lifestyle mobility perspective, lifestyle mobility framework to locate various modes of travel that exist between between permanent migration and temporary mobilities. These include various forms of contemporary nomadic and semi-nomadic mobilities, such as global nomadism, neo-nomadism, and flashbacking, among others. So lifestyle mobility is defined as ongoing movements of varying durations, which has multiple moorings and have no immediate plans to return home. The term lifestyle traveler describes individuals that engage in long-term travel as a lifestyle, and definition of lifestyle mobility shows that this type of mobility presumes the intention to move on rather than move back. So in such a manner, it well describes the nature of digital nomadic mobilities. And again, in my paper published in 2020, I build an argument and build a perspective why and how lifestyle mobility perspective is a suitable framework to locate digital nomadic mobilities. However, I have to mention a couple of reservations that should be considered in relation to defining digital nomadism as lifestyle mobility. So first, as lifestyle mobility presumes that there is no return home, I emphasize that this non-return home should be viewed in relation to digital nomadism from the perspective of the life course, not from through the seasonality or circulation between lifestyle and home locations. Second, lifestyle mobility should acknowledge issues of power geometries, inequalities of mobility, and mobility regime that reside in the production of digital nomadism, and that lifestyle migration perspective will pinpoints and describes. So yeah, to conclude everything that I said today, I think that mobility's perspectives on digital nomadism unfold important facets in relation to this type of mobility, not only in relation to physical relocation, connection, and telecommunication, but also by pinpointing issues of mobility regimes, different mobility purposes, and privilege in lifestyle-led travel. As the phenomena expands the margins of work-related mobilities and immobilities, as well as the way we think about mobile lifestyle and migration at large, this presentation opens up an avenue for discussions about digital nomadism as a new form of mobile strategy. And I invite mobility scholars and other scholars who study digital nomads to dwell deeper into multiple dimensions of digital nomadism, as well as intervening factors that are involved in production of this form of flexible mobility. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my perspectives and my ideas in relation to mobilities and digital nomadism. You are welcome to connect to me and hear more about my research, upcoming talks, new publications in LinkedIn, in Twitter. I also have my own YouTube channel where you can watch another episode on where I define digital nomads, as well as you can find a podcast there with Jan Bernosch, who explains digital nomad visas. Also my own podcast, Academia Experience. Just go to academiaexperience.com and you can listen to, again, an episode about digital nomad visas on YouTube, on Spotify, on Apple Podcast, or any other format that is suitable for you. Also, any feedbacks, questions, comments, connections, drop me an email. I'm happy to connect with anyone who is doing research on mobilities and digital nomadism. Thank you.
Thank you, Olga, for this very informative and mostly comprehensive presentation. I really enjoyed your talk. We are now going to open for questions. Me and Irene will moderate this debate. We had already two hands up. Now they are not anymore. Did you, Sean Buzuti? Can you?
No,
Yes?
I was just clapping.
Oh, just clapping. Okay.
Thank you, Sean.
Okay, just clapping. Yeah, it's worth the clap. So we can now open for some questions. Yeah. Maybe I can start.
Yes, please.
Maybe I can start. Olga, I would like to ask you if you can, how do you see the relation between digital nomadism and this gentrification process that has been going on in the European capital cities mostly? We have the phenomenon is here in Lisbon, and there are really some connections that can be made. From your experience, how do you see this connection?
Thank you for your question. And I should be coming to Lisbon in June, so I I have to see and witness that with my own eyes and experience. But there have been discussions and connections made between digital nomadism and gentrification processes. So in this regard, what I can say that before digital nomads, these processes have been already initiated by the peer-to-peer platforms, expansion of Airbnbs. We also know issues of over-tourism. In Barcelona, for example, that's also a result of the expansion of Airbnbs, among others. So I must say that digital nomads are an additional type of travelers that contribute to these processes that have been, little by little accumulating there, and now actively, coming out in different parts of the world. Yeah, we see certain reports from Mexico City. Lisbon has been, the discussion has been with housing activists also from Lisbon, and we see the Barcelona and some other locations are unfortunately becoming involved in this gentrification processes.
Okay, thank you. I will give the Irene. Open your mic, please. Yeah.
Yes. Hello. Good afternoon, Olga. Thank you so much for your talk. I enjoy very much. It was very interesting in the way you brought different concepts and try to discuss them. Well, I have different questions. I don't know whether they make sense to you or not in this particular part or phase of your research. Anyway, one thing that I really would like to know, what do you think, is that how does this kind of visa to digital nomads will or has the potential to overcome the mobility constraints that several passports have? By meaning, if a person is a digital nomad, he just has a free pass to all the countries that have this visa. That was, what do you know about that? Other question, probably also, I don't know, what do you know? But I really enjoy very much this connection you made with aspirations to the good life, which makes a lot of sense to me. But do you have any further research with these digital nomads that could give us an idea of what people really feel like to be a digital nomad? Are they really happy? Do they really feel that they are having a good life, or is because to me the nomad lifestyle, it must be also very exhausting and have to deal with a lot of things. So I think this part it needs it's not the main topic of your talk, of course, but I think it's something that I would like to know more. And also, I would like to ask you if you could elaborate a little bit more on this motility notion. It has to do with motion and not with mobile, because I don't know if I really understood it well. So thank you very much. I'll be happy to.
Can you repeat the last point?
The last point, it's on motility. You said motility. Yeah. If you can elaborate a little bit more, the difference between motility and mobility. My question is, has it to do with motion, and in what sense is that different from movement? Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, well, let me start with that then. Mobility, when we talk about mobility, we talk about movement, a particular relocation physical or virtual communication connection at a distance. Motility rather is a potential to move. So it doesn't require the movement if you do not desire to. So it's a potential aspiration, right? A set of possibilities to be mobile if desired. So that's that's the main differentiation. The more deep conceptual discussions on this, of course, in the literature, but that's the major difference. So motility comes before mobility. So in order to be mobile, should be this mobility potential. A good question about visas as a potential to overcome some for some nationals who are restrained with visas. Definitely, I see. Well, we do not have a lot of empirical evidence, but I see that, for example, Russian nationals during the recent events have been using digital nomad visa to stay legally somewhere abroad. I'm sure this, at some point, somebody will actually tell us about that, some notes from the field. But I do know single examples, so I cannot really generalize about that, but it's definitely a way to for those nationals who do not have so-called powerful passports to also be to stay somewhere in a destination like European destination or this digital nomad visa destination. About the question, how does it feel like to be a digital nomad? That would be actually a very great autoethnographical piece that I would also like to read and to see whether somebody actually doing research on that, or maybe nomads are sharing their experiences. Maybe if somebody knows anything about this, please post maybe in chat or share this information. Does somebody actually does this kind of this deep ethnographic or like self-reflection, like what is it to be a nomad? Yeah, maybe, I don't know, Sean or Fabiola, anyone who's there, Mari, who are doing now field works around the world. So yeah, maybe if you have any ideas on that. I do not have an answer to that, unfortunately.
I can say something. Yeah, it's a lifestyle with its pros and its cons. I guess the pros are the freedom to move, the freedom to maybe move with the seasons and to escape the European winter, go to Thailand. And the cons can be, this sense of social disconnect and isolation. And so there's a big kind of issue with nomads trying to find community, trying to find connection. And that comes with, moving around all the time. You're continually taking yourself out of social contexts and communities and having to start the whole process again of making connections and building community. So that's kind of one of the costs or the dark sides of digital nomadism. But I think anyone that stays in the space for a decent amount of time is willing to take on those costs, because for them, they find that the benefits outweigh those costs. So it depends on the individual themselves. But I think the freedom aspect and just the ability, tourism is great because you're able to travel around and learn and meet different people and learn about different cultures. So if we take the positive sides of tourism, digital nomadism they're getting that positive side of tourism on a long-term basis without having to return home. So it's it's a lifestyle with ups and downs, just like any lifestyle. I don't think it's necessarily living the dream. There is no such thing, I think, as a dream lifestyle. But I guess it just depends on each individual.
Yeah, it's an individualized project, and not everyone can actually sustain this lifestyle. So like like those who persist in digital nomadism. So maybe we can ask them what are the processes in evolution and to actually adopt this lifestyle. I see a couple of questions in chat. So
yeah, let's
can
address the one by Jan, maybe, who was the first.
Yeah, Jan, thank you.
Did I read?
Yeah, well, everyone can see the chat probably, and Jan asks that my definition of digital nomadism is rather broad, including the freedom to move or concept of motility. I wonder what's your take on some narrower approaches like Dave Cook in his recent paper. Yes, he has a great paper. Use the condition of a minimum 3 relocations per year to classify as a digital nomad. Well, there are, I mean, yeah, MBO reports, MBO partners, the State of Independence in America, they also have, in their definitions, they do not classify nomads, only those who travel on ongoing basis. I also take a careful wording saying that on a semi-permanent basis. So it's really hard to give a precise definition how long someone should travel to be classified as a digital nomad. But I appreciate others do take courage to propose different timeframes for that. So I in a way do not have an answer to that question, but I appreciate other approaches and other ways to define and in a more narrow sense exist when we talk about digital nomads.
Thank you.
Yeah, another question about to take a look at digital nomadism from a social sustainability perspective. Especially for countries like Kenya, aiming at diversifying their tourism products. I'm not sure I follow what social sustainability perspective is here in this relation, how this new group of travelers would fit the local social fabric. Is that the question?
Abby, are you in the room?
Maybe you can comment what's particular in mind in this question.
I think what I had in mind was like for developing countries which have really relied on natural resources for like safaris and beach and all that, like how can they use this, how can they brand themselves as countries which are open to digital nomadism for sustainability's sake?
Well, that's a marketing perspective to that, but again, connectivity and work productivity that should be taken into consideration. So, well, Kenya with safaris and nature-based tourism is definitely one of the attractive destinations for digital nomads. Again, if we take into account the basic motivations, that these are like novelty, new experiences, that are touristic motivations. So if to that we are adding the possibility to accomplish work-related duties, then that's I guess my answer. A way to give a possibility to work while traveling through Kenya. Yeah. So
then a comment, I guess, more of a comment from Kaisu Kosela.
Somebody wanna connect? Nice to meet you, Philip.
Yeah.
So. Okay, Kaisu, thank you. The issue of Kaisu is asking about the issue of motility. As the discussion of who qualifies as a true digital nomad is ongoing both among scholars and nomads themselves. Okay, I think it relates closely also to the discussion of who the visas are targeted at. I think the definition of digital nomad is expanding, and nomads indeed choose different patterns and different speeds of travel. Yeah, it's just a general comment, I guess. Yeah, thank you guys for this feedback.
We have Eleonora with she wants to put a question in the room. Please open your mic. Thank you. Go ahead.
Hello, thank you very much for your speech, Olga. I wanted to ask a question. You pointed attention of few that obviously relate digital nomads to tourism. So from the motivations to moving around, digital nomad visa, wherever. But I wanted to ask you about accommodations. Like, which are the most used / preferred forms of accommodations by digital nomads when they travel while working?
Well, I do not have stats on that. It's hard to answer. Again, I would probably ask help from the audience, other digital nomad researchers, but I would say that Airbnbs and these peer-to-peer platforms, service apartments are the preferred forms of accommodation. I think Sean is nodding. Okay, and
I think Airbnb, and also a lot of nomads are finding apartments through Facebook Marketplace. So it's usually they're looking for kind of apartments that are more kind of long term and have self-catering options, and
and Fabiola, want to comment or ask a question also?
Yes, please.
Yes, sorry for not putting on my camera. I just wanted to, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I just wanted to jump in this conversation. And aside of thanking you, Olga, for this very, very informative and well-structured paper, I wanted to say about the issue of like defining nomads. I think there are two perspectives. One is like defining their motivations and their behavior. And one is like observing them at the destination. And regard to the question asked about their behavior and their impacts on destinations, for me, it's like a big question mark. How different are digital nomads from other temporary, like long-term tourists in the way they impact destinations? Because of course there is this key component of work practices that are requiring different infrastructures, but at the same time, when we talk more broadly about gentrifications, I think I don't know how significant, how different. I mean, do digital nomads just increase numbers of long-term tourists, or are they significantly different? This is my open question, and that I think there is a lot of research to be done on this aspect. But I have the impression that now digital nomads, as there is a lot of criticism, are the new scapegoat. You know what I mean? Like everybody's like, oh, digital nomads are stealing people's houses, but this is like a much older problem. So my open question and comment, and also like research agenda at the same time, is how significantly different are digital nomads' impacts on the housing problem in the major tourist European cities?
Yeah, a good question and good point, which also relates to the very first question today. Yeah, thank you, Fabiola, for adding this. Yeah, a lot of issues to look at in relation to digital nomads, and actually to a broader, housing and tourism development issues. So we have to look at certain aspects in a broader sense, right? Not just focusing on one group. I see Christy.
Christy?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for this very interesting presentation. I just have one conceptual question. how do you see the relation between the concept of digital nomads and the international agreed definition on a visitor or tourist according to the United Nations World Tourism Organization? You know that by convention, nomads are not considered visitors or tourists. But what about the case of digital nomads? Because you said that we have here tourist motivation. So just to sum up, do you consider digital nomads as being tourists from a destination perspective?
Thank you.
Yeah, well, from the destination perspective, again, my recent paper, when we had a look on a supply side, at stakeholders' perspectives on digital nomadism, they are yet recognizing it as I would say that they not purely classify them as tourists, but they classify it as an important group of customers, an important customer group. Though, if we look at the World Tourism Organization definition of tourism, which classifies that somebody traveling outside their home environment overnight, so that's definitely a definition which digital nomad falls under. Yeah, but then when we talk about tourism, we have a classical differentiation between work and leisure. And here's like where nomads bring in work with them. So this is where kind of this, we have a stumbling point here that it's kind of falls under the definition of tourism, but it's not quite, they are not quite tourists. Yeah.
And what about the duration of stay? So if there is a duration of more than 1 year, can we talk about this tourism definition or perspective or not? What do you think about this duration?
Yeah, if we take like ongoing, yeah, you mean if they stay in one destination or they just do not stay home
if,
for over a year?
They stay, for instance, more than 1 year, because we have this threshold of 1 year in the tourist definition. So this is what I mean.
Yeah, this is.
Yeah, it's a little
there's like empirically there are no restrictions of moving between, you know, from digital from tourists to digital nomads to then expat or to lifestyle migrants. So it's I think at this point we need more data and more information on nomads, like what are the lifestyles, what are the patterns that are there. How can we classify like settled nomads and then it's like professional nomads, or just what are the categories of these travelers, or touristic nomads who just, you know, go and try this for sometime months or two. So yeah.
Thank you.
Good conceptual questions, but not many answers to that. Thank you. Yeah, Mari.
Mari, please.
Yes, hello to everybody from Lisbon, actually, where I'm conducting research on similar topics. And thank you to Olga for a very inspiring talk. I really enjoyed it. So maybe I'm repeating what everybody just said, but I wanted to come back to these conceptual issues and definitional issues. And because I have been really struggling with it also myself, having now conducted 60-some interviews with for digital nomads. So to say, and especially since I was doing also data collection during the COVID-19 pandemic, I struggled with this definition because there were more and more people who actually defined themselves as digital nomads. So their self-identification was a digital nomad. But, you know, when I discussed a little bit more with them, they were maybe more on the side of remote workers, if I were to classify them as a researcher. So they were staying 6 months somewhere on the Canary Islands and then going back home, basically. So hence this struggle that I have had also with this conceptualization of the term. And going back in time, when I did my first interviews in 2017, before the current project I'm working on in Thailand, there are a lot of people who are actually contesting this classification, saying that that no, I'm not a digital nomad, I'm not a backpacker, or I'm not a travel blogger working in Bali or something like that. So there was quite a lot of contestation towards the term. So I'm just thinking of how this, to what extent do we rely on the self-identification of digital nomads as digital nomads themselves, and how these this term also and its connotations change over time. For instance, what Fabiola brought up, that this scapegoating of digital nomads, if it starts to get more and more negative connotations in public discourse, for instance, in media debates, etc., does it mean that people identify themselves as digital nomads to a lesser degree? Also, are there other terms that come up, and so forth? So this is not so much of a question per se, or I don't know if it's a rambling comment, but yeah, I really welcome all kinds of research concerning the conceptualization of this. And I also think that what we currently are witnessing is also the challenges in conceptualizing digital nomad, also due to COVID-19 pandemic, since we do have a flow of remote workers also who are mobile to some extent in a similar manner to digital nomads. So kind of like, to what extent can we actually have very precise, well-defined conceptualizations of digital nomad currently, since the phenomenon is really in motion itself also. So we might have a lot of subcategories, sub-classifications, and refinement to do in terms of the conceptualization of digital nomad. But I raise my hat to everybody who is tackling this issue now, and for instance, Dave Cook was already mentioned here, who just published a paper on this.
Yeah, he you know, had a, you know, difficult, oily, it's a great job. Like he had the courage to actually to do the further, you know, narrowing down and classification. And that's, again, coming back to Jan's question about why do I have a broad definition? Because it's sometimes impossible to grasp or define every single aspect with a specific like a sentence or one definition of a digital nomad. So yes, I agree that it's very much in motion. We see different groups entering the digital nomad market, and again, self-classification is something that Dave Cook pretty much relied on in his earlier work, where we can place a digital nomad between these traveling professionals and working professionals, and he has this an interesting and useful graph. So I must say that I do not rely much on self-classification in my definitions, but I take into account what artists do in this regard, and utilize where appropriate also other researchers' work who work on definitions and classifications. And again, Dave Cook did, I think, a very useful contribution with his recent publication in relation to that. So thank you. It's, again, a lot of questions, a lot of thoughts in motion, and not so many answers, because the field and the subject, the phenomena is very much in flux.
Thank you. Are there any more questions?
Any other questions or comments? Actually, this is why I love this digital nomad conversations, because it's a chance to actually meet and talk to other digital nomad researchers and exchange ideas and challenge ourselves with these questions. Also, just want to mention again, just on my YouTube channel, we have a video, 3-hour video with wonderful presentations from online event that I hosted last December. Sean was there speaking, Dave Cook was speaking, and many others. So please go and check it. Many interesting research, many interesting presentations from researchers around the world on digital nomadism. So yeah.
Thank you, Olga. Well, if there are no more questions, I just want to thank everyone that enrolled in this webinar, mostly to Olga. Thanks for your brilliant talk. And I thank everyone that came here with these very interesting questions. The conceptual boundaries of the digital nomads is really interesting, although I am not researching on digital nomads, but I am researching with Irene with a category of privileged mobility also, which is the investors. And from the perspective of those people, we find that there is a gap between how the state conceives them and how they think about themselves. And so it might be also the same might be happening also with the digital nomads. How they perceive themselves also might be different from the approach that we have on them. I think this is a brilliant research topic. I enjoyed the presentation, your presentation, really enjoyed it very much.
And thank you for giving me the opportunity, to share my insights today. I see thank you messages. And
we have a last minute invitation. We have a last minute invitation. Okay, we are invited to join a group in LinkedIn by Kaiso Costello. Thank you very much. Irene, do you want to open your mic and say something?
Well, I would like to thank you, Olga, very much for the so interesting talk of today that really make me, in my particular case, to think a lot about this. And I think it also inspired many people here. So thank you very much, Olga, and thank you very much for all your presence and contributions to the debate and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you all.
Thank you. We are closing.